Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of BHBA Family Law Presents Direct Examination with Dan and Lauren. Along with Lauren Youngman from Youngman Reichstein, I'm Dan Bemmel, financial advisor and certified divorce financial analyst. During each episode of our show, we explore our guest's personal and professional history and dig into a meaningful legal topic. Please continue to join us for our upcoming episodes, always at 12:30 p.m. live on Zoom. Dan Jaffe on May 4th, Alexandra Leichter on June 1st, and Kendra Thomas and Gina Kang, the BHBA Family Law Section leaders, on July 6th. The links are already up on the bar's event calendar and will also be available in the chat box. Lauren.
Thank you, Dan. Good afternoon, everyone. You will receive your MCLE certificate shortly after the program. Please take a moment to complete the survey that's included with your certificate. The Family Law section is sponsored by White, Zuckerman, Warsofsky, Luna, and Hunt, and Our Family Wizard. White, Zuckerman, Warsofsky, Luna, and Hunt provide a wide variety of resources to complete almost any project, large or small. They also provide traditional accounting and tax practice services. We invite you to contact them to discuss your specific accounting needs and learn how they can be of service to you. Our Family Wizard is a secure co-parenting platform that supports divorced or separated parents in managing the daily responsibilities of raising children. Specialized features help co-parents organize routines, share files, track expenses and payments, check in at exchanges, send messages, and more, all while thoroughly documenting their activity. Okay, that's it for our sponsors. Dan, we can go ahead and get started with the program.
All right, thanks, Lauren. And today we welcome Ron Brot to the show. Among his many professional achievements and accolades, Ron is the immediate past president of the LA County Bar Association, one of only a few family law attorneys, and as far as we know, the only Valley attorney to ever hold that post. He's also a prior recipient of LACBA's Spencer Brandeis Award and has chaired way too many professional groups to list here. He's the founding partner of Brot Gross Fishbein, and for the next hour, our guest. So we have a lot to get to today, but first, Ron, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you, Lauren.
Well, like I said, we do have a lot to get to, but I want to start with your kind of personal philosophy. You've always struck me as a especially positive person, especially considering your longevity in the field. So what drives you, what keeps you going in the practice of family law?
So my first inclination is to say hunger. So I've known hunger in a lot of different ways. I've known physical hunger. I've hungered to become educated. I was hungry to learn family law when it was the only option that looked like it was going to present itself to me. So that in part, keeps me going. I've always believed that, at least as far as I know, there's only one time around, and why not take advantage of all of the opportunities that life presents to us, whether that's work or fun or whatever. My father was a working man all of his life, and had the philosophy that he didn't need to go on vacations because he loved what he did. So he was on vacation 365 days a year. And one way or another, that trickled down to his son. So I love what I do. I've loved it for the 50 years that I've been a member of the bar, celebrated on January 5th of this year.
Wow.
Long answer to a short question. Sorry.
Well, like Dan mentioned at the top, you've held a lot of leadership roles. How do you balance your community involvement with your work and your home life?
When I was asked to become the president of the Los Angeles County Bar Association, I recognized that it was probably a 50% time commitment. That means of my work life, 50% of that was going to be gone. And so obviously I had to discuss that with my wife, my family, because they would see much less of me. And I had to talk to my partners. And the truth is, everyone saw more of me than they thought they would, maybe more than they wanted to. When we focus our attention on the job right in front of us, the hours sort of melt away, and our time then spent in other parts of our lives just becomes more meaningful, focused and more meaningful. There hasn't been a lot of let's just sit around time in Ron Brot's life. It's just not what I do. I've never taken up golf. I don't have the extra 4 hours if it takes 4 hours to play around a golf. I just don't have it. But I love what I do, and I recognize that my family has the right to my time, and I want that. My partners have a right to my time, my clients, and I want that as well. So we just add a little water to the pot and we make more soup. So
I like that. More narrowly, Ron, how do you look at a divorce itself? Or it's such a big part of family law, of course, but divorce conceptually and the actual process that you shepherd clients through.
So I think we're going to talk a little bit more about this later as to how I came to be a family law attorney. Divorce is just a life event, right? We have children, we get married, we get a job, we may lose a job, we buy a house, we sell a house, and life goes on. And in many lives, married people end up getting divorced. If you believe the statistics, it's going to be around 50%, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. But our life is not our divorce. Divorce is just an event of life. So at least with my clients, we try and establish early on in the process that there will be a beginning and a middle and an end to this divorce. The procedural part of it that the court deals with, and the emotional part of it that the client deals with. And those two are not always in sync, are they? Right? People will get divorced and they'll still be connected. Other people disconnect before the physical divorce. So it's recognizing that people are not fungible, that this is simply a process for an unhappy event that's going on in their life. Their life is not their divorce. Divorce is just a part of their life.
So let's roll back the clock a little bit and meet a young Ron. Introduce us to young Ron. Growing up in Michigan, sorry about the tournament loss, of course. Growing up in Michigan, did you always want to be a lawyer?
So I did not come from a privileged family. I'm the first one to go to college, the first one to be a professional. And I thought I would be a doctor, actually. But then I saw a needle at an early visit to a doctor's office, and I'm not sure whether I fainted or not, but I was never going to look at a needle go in an arm again. And I hated the sight of blood. So from almost my earliest memories thereafter, I wanted to be a lawyer. I watched every lawyer show on television. What
was your favorite? What was your favorite one?
Perry Mason with the scene at the end where this grilling cross-examination would take the witness who finally couldn't take the pressure and would admit that he did it. We don't have many of those moments in the real practice of law.
Right. So you followed that dream and you eventually ended up in law school. What was your law school experience like?
I was slow to catch on, interestingly enough. So I was always a pretty smart kid, high grades. And my first semester of law school, I just didn't get it. I didn't really know what to study. And my grades for my first semester of law school were the lowest grades I had ever had in my life. And interestingly enough, it just clicked. And thereafter I did really well. So it's interesting that my experience in law school started out not good. You know, had me questioning, is this really for me? How can I not be getting all A's anymore? And so it was unpleasant. Once I caught on, it was terrific. I had the opportunity to work for a professor who was writing a book, and I helped him do that. And then he and I then went on the speaking circuit after I'd become a lawyer, teaching the Uniform Commercial Code around the United States, which is very cool, right? To be speaking with your kind of your mentor and law school professor.
Well, I want to go back to when you got those first bad grades. Why did you stick with it?
Oh, I'm not much for quitting anything. So when things don't go well, I'm all for analyzing what happened and looking for where I'm responsible. I'm not too interested in your part in our conflict. I'm far more interested in my part in whatever is going on. I can do something about my part. I can't do anything about your part. And so I apply that to the practice of law, to relationships. It's an effective way to handle cases, right? We prep and do everything that we can do on our side of the case, cut down the unexpected significantly, and then go for it.
So what did you do when you first got out? What were the first jobs, or how did you find your way at first as an actual attorney?
So I was fortunate to be at the University of Michigan, and firms come to recruit from Michigan in a small, by our standards today, certainly small, maybe 14 lawyers. I can't really recall. About a 14 lawyer firm that was an offshoot of O'Melveny gave me an offer, and I was from Michigan, and my wife was from Ohio. We both went to the University of Michigan, and California sounded great. So we took that offer, and I became an associate of a law firm at 606 South Olive in downtown Los Angeles. That's right on Pershing Square, which happened also to be the building in which the LA County Bar Association was housed, which is another part of my story. So I became a litigation associate. That Perry Mason image, I never let go of. I wanted to be a litigator. I knew I wanted to be a litigator. I wanted the challenge. So I did that. The firm represented banks, and so I was doing banking litigation. I had written about that when I was doing my work for my law school professor. So I knew the legal subject area, and I became a litigator. And in days when there were no computers, there were copiers, there were no word processors. One of my first depositions was I think it was in Oregon, and they did it by hand, by dipping a pen into an inkwell and taking the deposition. A long time ago. We still had carbon paper at the time, so you'd be reading your letters and your fingers would be blue. A different world. So I was a business litigator, really specializing in representing banks.
And so then what was your experience at that time at the firm, and what was your trajectory there?
Oh, I was eager, enthusiastic. I'm sure most would call me aggressive. Whatever job they gave me, I wanted a little more. I knew I was ready to try a case long before I was ready to try a case. And Dan, you don't know this story. So one day I was going up the elevator in my building, and there was a young lady in the building, and she looked sad. So what's the matter? She says, "Oh, I need a lawyer." My eyes perk up. Well, I'm a lawyer. Let's get off at my floor and come and tell me your problem. So she told me that she had been a resident of an apartment building in Westwood, one of those luxury buildings with an ice cream parlor and a billiard room and all the amenities. And when they couldn't fill up the building, they started dropping the rents for the identical apartments. And then those rents got lower and lower and lower. So different people with the same apartments were paying significantly different rents. The landlord wouldn't adjust anyone's rent, so the tenants picketed. And while they were picketing, they were served with eviction notices. And so I took that case pro bono, and it was covered by the LA Times. I think I was a lawyer for 2 years at the time. And the Times wrote that defense lawyer Ronald F called no witnesses, instead arguing the case on constitutional grounds, and we won.
Your first notice.
Yeah. So there it was. That was the beginning. I loved it. I loved every minute of it.
Was that your first trial? Was that your actual first trial?
It was.
Oh, cool.
It was. I have those yellowed press clippings, and I treasure them, not because it was the biggest case, but because that was the start. And I just loved it so much that I knew that this is what I was supposed to be doing.
So if that was the moment when the orchestra swells and you really caught it, right? When did you start thinking about leaving that firm? How did your career arc go from there?
So I was representing banks, and I had become, I didn't know people in Los Angeles. I'm from Michigan, and my folks had always been committed to service. They didn't have very much, but it was always, whatever you have, make sure you share it and share your time with others. And so I went and volunteered at the Bar Association. I thought I would get a better sense of belonging and give what little I had to give. I was just a baby lawyer by belonging. And so I started doing that. And a recruiter came to me one day and said this mega firm from San Francisco, Morrison Foerster, MoFo, as you know, was going to open a Los Angeles office, and my credentials seemed to fit with what they were looking for. I was a 4-year lawyer at the time, and it was a chance to start the litigation department for Morrison Foerster in Los Angeles. That must have been about 1976-ish. And I said, sure. So I became an associate at Morrison Foerster around that time.
And so what was your trajectory as an associate there?
They were representing Crocker National Bank. They had become general counsel, and they needed a banking litigator. That was it just fit me perfectly. And so I started doing cases. I did well. I became a partner 2 years later, 6 years out of school. And my bar career started going upwards. I remember calling up the chair of the it was called the trial lawyers section of the bar at the time. It's now the litigation section. And I just made a call saying, I think I was still at my first job when I did this, saying, I'd like to become involved. I don't know if you have any little job for me to do, but whatever it is to do, I'll do it. And I remember within a couple of weeks, I received a letter appointing me to the executive committee of the trial lawyers section of the bar as the young lawyers representative. I had no idea what the section really did. It said trial lawyer, so I liked that. That sounded good to me. I wanted to be a trial lawyer, and I was a young lawyer. And that was the beginning. It was just volunteering. All it took was a phone call, being able to handle the fear of the unknown, calling someone, what if they say no? Oh no. And I wasn't going to let that daunt me. And so that was the beginning of my bar career. And I'm sure that must have been around 73, 74, sometime early. Little did I know that I would come to chair that section of the bar.
So what was the culture like at MoFo back then? Did you embrace it? Was it a good fit for you?
I think MoFo is just a terrific law firm, as people-oriented as it could be. That said, that was before many firms were doing multiple offices. There were very few firms in the country who had multiple offices then. And it was a San Francisco-based law firm making a foray into Southern California. The office was started with a wonderful guy from their San Francisco office, an associate in the business department, and me. So I think the culture of that law firm was and continues to be exemplary. Whether I fit in a big law firm has nothing to do with the law firm. If I were to be in a large law firm, that would be as great a place as I could find. I don't know that my career plan, if I had a plan, really fit in a large law firm context. So I have nothing but good things to say about MoFo. And if anyone were to ask me about whether they should go there, I would not hesitate in a second to recommend it. But for me, the fit was not as personally rewarding as maybe I would have liked.
So then what? So you were at MoFo. What happened next?
So it's somewhat common knowledge about what happened to me. So I became fairly well known, at least through the bar, and my rise was fast and my fall was equally fast. I developed a problem with alcohol and some other substances, and ended up being homeless, actually by the early 80s. So I was out of law and out of friends and out of money. And I was just one of those faces that we see everywhere in Los Angeles. I wasn't homeless for long. I never lived under a bridge, but I had no address. I ended up sleeping in a car with no gasoline to drive it. So I had a chance to come to the top of a mountain looking down, and it wasn't reaching it through a successful climb. It was being really all alone and wondering, what will become of me. And so, and that's when I came to know hunger and despair. And I had to make a choice. And through the help of some wonderful people, I was able to achieve a sobriety in 1984 that I maintained through today. That allowed me then to make some decisions and take some actions that allowed me to become the person who you're interviewing today.
So if you take us back to that time, 1984, you just got sober, you had to start over. What did your practice look like? What did you do?
So I was rescued by my Aunt Pearl and Uncle Saul from Canoga Park, California. And I only lived on the west side. I didn't know where Canoga Park, California was. I thought it was maybe on the Arizona border or something. It wasn't, but it seemed like it. That was a long ride from Venice to Canoga Park. So in any event, so I was living with Aunt Pearl and Uncle Saul, and they had an abandoned factory, and I was attending a 12-step program every day. And I had a sponsor who said I had to get a job. And Aunt Pearl and Uncle Saul allowed me to set up an office in the front of a near abandoned factory in the reception area with one red wall, one blue wall, one yellow wall, one green wall, and a piece of carpet just thrown down over a cement slab. And so that was my office. And I nailed my diplomas to the wall. and I didn't have a file cabinet because I didn't have any files, and I didn't need any files because I didn't have any clients. And I just shared the factory with hundreds or more water beetles who were running around there. And that was the beginning. That was the beginning. I just would, I would go to my meetings, and I would go to the factory, and I would go to the meetings, and I would go to the factory, and I had some business cards printed up. I didn't have a telephone. The phone was answered blank engineering by the one guy who was there along with me. And that was the beginning. And I just had to have the faith that if I continued to do the right thing every day, if I continued to suit up and show up, if I didn't quit before the miracle, if I just stuck to it, that something would happen. And it did.
So what was the work? What was the actual work back then, and what were the clients like?
Well, there was no work for a long time, right? So, and it was good that it was given to me without charge because I had no money to pay for it. It was absolutely the bottom. And so, you know, we all know people, don't we? We have cousins, or we have aunts, or we have friends, or we have the scout leader, or we have my mother's mahjong group, maybe, or whatever it is. So, you know, Ronnie's a lawyer, or Ron's a lawyer, or that guy's a lawyer. And I just put out the word among the very unmoneyed group in which I was residing at the time, that here I was. And so I did doorway law. You know what doorway law is, right? It's whatever comes in the door. That's the kind of law you're going to do. And I had told Dan that one day a lady came to me and said that she wasn't getting enough support to feed her children. And I didn't like the sound of that conversation, I assure you. And then she asked me if I knew anything about child support. And all I could think of was, oh no, family law, not for me. Never, never, never. And I heard her ask if I could help her. And I knew that the words "no way" were going to come out of my mouth, but my ears heard, "I'll try." Mm. And so I went to the Van Nuys Law Library, and I learned a little bit, and we went to court and came out of the courtroom. There were tears coming down her cheeks, and I thought I really screwed something up. I didn't get her enough. What did I do? And she took my hands and said, "My children will eat because of you." And that was the moment that the orchestra started to play. Mm. That was my moment where I recognized this is why I wanted to be a lawyer. Nothing against big law practice, nothing against mergers and acquisitions and major litigation and all of that stuff, much of which I had done. Nothing moved me as much as affecting this lady's life. And that must have been, I don't know, 1984, 1985, something like that, more than 35 years ago. And that began a love affair with family law that continues to this day.
So from that first moment when you realized you had this, passion for family law advocacy, how did you learn family law? How did you start gaining new family law clients, just starting from scratch like that?
So I didn't know how to market. I didn't know that I wanted to market. I was surprised that I had found this family law niche for myself, and I had no idea how to build a practice. Here's what I knew. I knew that I was smart, and I knew that I was able to learn. And how much I learned and how well I learned was all within my control. Maybe I couldn't control getting clients, but I could control the preparation that I could do. And so I set about learning family law voraciously. And I had to swallow my pride in terms of going to fundamental programs and showing up thinking people had heard of me and were they whispering about me. And I just threw myself into learning as much as I could about family law, substantively and procedurally. Yeah, so that was one thing, and that was to really prepare myself. And the second was do really good work. Don't be afraid of putting in the extra time. Just do good work. Be honest with the clients. Understand and appreciate what they were going through and charge a fair fee. That was the most interesting thing because I was charging so much less than I had charged when I had left major law. And I felt guilty about that. I had to learn that it's good work and good work deserves a fair fee. It doesn't have to be the highest fee. It just needs to be a fair fee. And so that was actually kind of the hardest part. And what I learned is that if I took enough action on the outside, that the feelings of comfort would come on the inside. But I had to do it in that order. I had to take the action first so that to let my feelings kind of catch up to that. And so you know who we all market. Lauren, I know that you have a practice and you have a significant marketing plan, same as my plan. Do really good work and the clients will carry the message for us. And that's what I did because I didn't know to do anything else. I just did good work. I told people I was available. After a while, I could even afford a tie and had to have a tie when I went to court. I didn't have to borrow one anymore. And do good work and develop a sense of confidence and allow the client to tell someone else. And one client will make two, and that's what happened for me. And then two became four, and four became eight. And after a while, it became time to leave the factory.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about that. How long? What is a while, and what was it like leaving? What was that next step out of the factory for you?
So I was in the factory, as I recall it, for I think a couple of years, and I hired someone from my recovery group to be my secretary, and then I didn't have to do all my own work. So at the very beginning, I had a secretary and I had a clerk and I had an associate and I had a messenger person. They were all me, right? They all looked like me because they were me. There was no time for anybody else. And I found at the beginning, everything seemed so difficult. I remember struggling. I had to send a letter, certified mail, return receipt requested. And I got that green form that we get from the post office. And I just looked at it and it seemed too much, just too much to do. And then I learned how to do it. And I learned how to use a computer. Computers were just coming in at the time. So if you think about where we were, I had never seen a computer, and my uncle Saul had a Radio Shack Trash 80 with a word processing program called Electric Pencil. And he taught me how to do it. I had flashcards, turn on here. I drew a picture of it. This is the on button. Next one, turn on monitor here, and turned it. And so you just have to learn it. Either learn it or don't learn it. There's no in between. And I knew that. So I had all the fears that people my age would have. All the young kids are going to be able to do this and I won't. And I thought, well, I already doubt whether I can do it. The worst that's going to happen is it'll be true. And in the unlikely event that I can master the use of a computer, we'll beat the game. And that's what happened, right? So one client told two and two told four, and it's about 2 years in, and I had a little bit of money set up, and I thought, I'm going to go out and get myself an office now. I'm going to leave the factory. Dan knows this story too. And so I went to an office at Topanga and Victory.
Mhm.
And it was just a little tiny office. It's now there are restaurants there. There were no restaurants there at the time. It was just an office building. And that wasn't good enough for me. And then I went to another building and that wasn't good enough. And I went to another building and that didn't. And I thought, what am I doing? Have I not learned the lesson through all those experiences? So I went back to the factory and I stayed one more year. Just because I thought I needed to be better grounded than that. And when I then left the factory, I went to the very same building on Topanga and Victory and rented the very same office that was still available and spent, I don't know, close to 20 years there. It grew over time because my practice thankfully grew as well. But that's the story of what happened.
So I like that idea. You were there for a long time, right? You were solo. You had your shop for 20 years. I want to talk a little bit about building a practice, what you were doing in those years, and then we'll get to what your last chapter, your most recent chapter in starting your current firm was. But back then, and really if you were starting again now, what do you think the best way to market yourself really is? Obviously you said building clients, doing good work, but what about externally?
So at the time, well, let me back up a little bit. What I have learned is that it takes about 5 years or so, maybe a little longer, maybe a little shorter, depending on who you are. It took me about 5 years of working for clients, not very many at the beginning, putting in a lot of time, more time than I really probably should have, but I didn't charge for it. I just wanted to do a really good job. And then those clients brought more clients, then they brought more clients. It took for me about 5 years to recognize that there's this steady flow of business coming in, that there are enough satisfied people out there who will inevitably refer you to somebody else, who there will be another client. If there isn't a client for 2 weeks, a new client who calls, it's not the end of the world. There will be 3 the next week. It just takes some time to recognize that that's going to happen. I know that there are others nowadays who market differently, very successfully. Our firm does a little of that, probably not as much as we should. I know large firms have marketing directors. I can only share my own experience, which was really the old-fashioned way. I thought it was important to continue to give to the community. And because my community was law, I wanted to give to that. And now that I'm a family law lawyer, instead of being active in the trial lawyer section of the bar, I'm going to become somehow active in the family law section of the bar. And so I was doing very small cases as a highly trained lawyer. And so I did pretty well, gratefully. I'm grateful to say. So my reputation in the San Fernando Valley grew as one of the go-to litigators for family law in the San Fernando Valley at the time. And then I was asked to become more active in the family law section of the LA bar. So I did that. And I thought that there would likely be some business generation that came from that. It didn't, but of course it didn't, because mostly I was with other people who had the same need. But I developed relationships, and I want to say this because I'm obviously a large advocate of bar associations. My life has been so advantaged by my bar activities. I've made personal relationships and professional relationships and ultimately business relationships. It just took much longer than I thought. So it's important to give. It's important to give without expecting a direct payback. And karma doesn't work that way. Karma works more like you give a little on the left and then something happens on the right, and you can't connect them with a string, but it happens enough that you believe in the principle. And you can believe in the principle that good things happen to good people who do good things. And we are so privileged as lawyers. It was and still is a noble profession. I get that it's become more of a business than I could ever have imagined when I was a young lawyer coming out of law school, and even when I started again in 1984, 1985. But it's still a profession and something to be respected and treasured. And it has so much that it will give to us and to our communities and to our society, that if we have the opportunity to give a little of ourselves or a little more of ourselves, everybody wins. We win, the bar wins, our clients win, the community is enhanced, and the world becomes a better place, kind of one day at a time. Not really your question, but I wanted to say that.
Well, so can you tell us a little bit about your transition after, I think you said 20 years of solo practice, to joining a partnership, and what that process was like, and how that came to be? Sure.
So one day, another lawyer from the San Fernando Valley named Brot Gross called me and said, would you be interested in partnering up?
Just like that.
He did. It was just out of the blue. We weren't friends. We had some cases with each other. He liked settling cases and I liked trying cases, and we represented kind of mid-range clients. We thought that there might be some synergy there. And I promptly said, no, I have no interest in doing that. Thanks. Not sure why you called me, but I'm doing just fine. No. And Mark was persistent, and ultimately I wanted Mark to try and explain to me how I would make more money by becoming his partner. And the more I contemplated, I just wanted to know that I wouldn't lose too much more money by going into a law firm. The idea of a collegial, collaborative law environment, not just being there by myself to answer my own questions, was really intriguing. It's the way I had started. And it felt kind of like this is a chance to come full circle, at least with that idea. So we said yes. We decided to set up a practice that was a high-level practice. We dedicated ourselves to doing sophisticated family law. We wanted to be in the location that we chose, which is where we still are today. We had a partner join us from a West Side family law firm, and then off we went. We didn't know where we would go. We had big dreams and great ideas, and didn't know much about execution. But here's what we knew: do the best work we could do, be honest with our clients, be respectful of the difficulties in life that they were having, and charge a fair fee. And that kind of common theme that was there at the beginning still worked. And we thought that we would be, in our dreams, the law firm that would intercept clients in the San Fernando Valley who might otherwise be going over the hill. And I think that worked for Mark. It didn't. That was not true for me. There was a synergy because of my litigation experience going all the way back to Morrison Forster, and that allowed me to then suddenly start doing much larger cases, and larger cases came to me. I'm so grateful to say.
What was that? We
were very happy.
We talked a little bit about what your first year was like in your different stops. What was the first year like at the new firm, especially being such a change going into a partnership? What was that first year like?
when the three of us were together, it felt wonderful. It felt like family. When I looked at the income and expense ledgers, not so much, because we had a new business and we had been successful individually before we started, but we didn't enjoy that immediate success.
So when did it get better? When did you feel like it was getting better?
The next year. We
Okay.
had a year where I don't know that we struggled. But it was hard. We were not very successful financially our first year. By the end of our second year, we had turned that corner, and we've done well since.
So since you've been doing well and you've been established as a firm, how do you handle growth and recruitment of associates?
Great question. So we grew quickly. We probably grew a little too quickly. It's difficult to manage work product when the base of your pyramid continues to grow. So what we found is that you have to add people at various levels. You have to promote people up as their skills increase so that they can learn to manage people. And there's an art to that. And again, there were growing pains. So we went up in size, we went down in size. I think we're at 9 or 10 now. We're extremely busy. We could use another couple lawyers, but interestingly enough, we hear that from most of our colleagues who are similarly situated in the family law community, that there is just a ton of work to do. Can't sacrifice quality for the sake of numbers. Ultimately, it can be one's undoing. And so I think we had to kind of pull back and then start to grow again, but on a more managed basis.
So when it comes to new associates, or if you want to answer it in terms of the community at large, or your time at LACBA as the president of LACBA, what's been your approach specifically to mentoring and leadership? How did you decide to do that? And what's important for you when you're working with young attorneys?
When I began in family law, I called two lawyers who I identified as two of the deans of the family law practice and who were nice people. And I explained my situation and asked if I could call them. And they said, of course. And they had a generosity of spirit that I found heartwarming, if not overwhelming. They're both gone now, but their spirits aren't, and their memories aren't. One of them actually became our family law supervising judge. I won't use names, but I can see their faces now. And because people were there to help me, I knew I was going to be there to help others. And so I've always done that. And when I became the president of the bar, one of my goals that was not met was to establish a mentoring program within LACBA on a formal basis. We made some progress, and I'm still hopeful that may happen one day. Whether it's formal or informal really doesn't matter so much. What we know as lawyers is we don't have an internship the way doctors do. We got our law degree and we're set free on the public to wreak whatever havoc or do whatever good we're going to do. I can't imagine coming here from Michigan in 1972 and hanging out a shingle and having an iota of knowledge as to what to do. I needed to be taught. And so it's important that we more senior lawyers make ourselves available formally or informally to help the younger lawyers along. And that can be when they ask for it, and maybe even when not, right? So if we're in a case and another lawyer makes a mistake, one of the bar presidents who preceded me was Michael Meyer. And Michael told the story of a lawyer who made a mistake in drafting the lease agreement. He was on the other side of the table. And Michael saw the mistake that the other opposing lawyer had made, thought for only a second, and then called him and told him about it so that it could be fixed. That sounds, how could you do that? That's the opposing party. This is an advocacy system. Well, is it? Are we really compromising the client's rights by helping someone who's made a mistake? Everyone has to answer the question for themselves. Of course, we have clients. Of course, the client's interests must come first. But we also have ethical responsibilities, right? To our clients, to the bar, to ourselves. And so when we have the chance to teach, we need to teach. We can correct without being abrasive. We can lead mostly by example, right? Do what I do, not what I say to do. And so, those are my thoughts about mentorship. I couldn't believe in it more strongly.
All right. Well, with our remaining few minutes, we wanted to at least touch upon the legal topic that you had selected. And that was a trial lawyer's perspective. This is your words, a trial lawyer's perspective on the right to evidentiary hearings that came out of the Elkins Commission, and we find in Family Code Section 217, as well as California Rule of Court 5.113. When we get into this topic, I'm interested to hear, what was your experience like practicing prior to the changes that came out of Elkins? And then we can get into more after that.
So comparing civil practice to family practice, there was this sense that everything would just be riflerized, and unless you got to a trial, which is under 3% of the cases, you're never really going to try a case, right? That there weren't available judges, there wasn't available trial time, and so trial skills were not in high demand on an everyday basis in family law cases. Of course, there were some pendente lite hearings that were evidentiary in nature, but not a lot. And it was difficult in arguing why the court should give up its time and resources to hear this insignificant case that may only involve custody or relocation or whatever. I say that tongue in cheek because I was a strong advocate that if a fender bender, if an automobile collision case would warrant a week of the time of an LA Superior Court judge, why in the world would the future of a child not be entitled to the same amount of time? And so when the Elkins Commission ultimately made its recommendations, and on January 1, 2011, Family Code Section 217 became law, it not only encouraged me as a trial lawyer, which I've been for 50 years, but it warmed me to recognize that the importance of the issues in family law cases, which are vital to the development of children and so meaningful to what would happen to husbands and wives, parents, as they went forward in life. We live within the reality that there's only so many judges, there's only so many courtrooms, and there's only so much trial time. And so to some extent, there is a judicial pushback to 217 and 5113 of the rules of court, with a tendency for some judges to more frequently than others, find good cause to forego the evidentiary hearing. I think lawyers need to fight for the rights of their clients to have that hearing. It's clear that 217 was intended to tell the bench, family law cases get live hearings. It should be the exception, not the rule, to have those hearings denied for the good cause finding that is required. Rule 5113 in its purpose section says that the court must receive live competent testimony, absent really good cause. Now it's the lawyer's job, who have been now given that gift of being able to have evidentiary hearings. It's the lawyer's job to become educated as to how to conduct those hearings. And family law lawyers have not always been the best courtroom lawyers. And so hats off to those who have put on trial advocacy training seminars, whether it's the bar or it's private organizations. I tell my associates, if you're down in court, just stop in there and watch. Learn what to do, learn what not to do. There's so many resources online. There are wonderful programs. The LA Bar, when I was just coming up in the LA Bar, we started the trial advocacy program that has since grown and gone through some contortions. Is now known as the Sorrel Trope Trial Advocacy Program. We need to learn to be better and better advocates. And that's good for ourselves. It's good for the clients. It's good for the courts. It's good for the administration of justice.
Well, that kind of touches upon what my next question was going to be, which is how can young attorneys improve their trial skills or evidentiary hearing skills? I know you mentioned there are some CLE programs out there, but is there, an alternative to just real hands-on experience?
Nothing is as good as real hands-on experience. So we can learn it up here, and we can watch it, we can hear it, we can look at it online, but there is, and then we can go to some programs where they have simulated courtroom settings. We can do practice exams. The LA Bar runs the TAP program, Trial Attorneys Program. I'm not sure what the P is, but there are a variety of those programs, and then you have to take it. And so how can you do that? You can do that, if no other way, by knocking on your boss's door saying, can I take a witness? Can I do a deposition? Can I take a little witness? Can I do a custodian of records deposition so I at least get to hear my voice, swear in? And I do that with my associates. I let them feel those butterflies and stumble through saying, state and spell your name. And then there are some wonderful places who could use the help, whether it's Harriet Buhai or the Domestic Violence Project, or I don't want to leave anybody out. So there are a variety of those opportunities. Anytime you can get yourself into a courtroom and ask a question, it's like Tom Cruise in A Few Good Men walking into there saying, this is what a courtroom looks like. I'm making an argument. Nothing takes the place of the exhilaration, the nerves beforehand, the thrill of unpacking your briefcase, and then standing up and saying, may it please the court, and recognizing that you are your dream. Your dream has come true through you.
So we often end our show by asking our guests, what advice would you give your younger self or new attorneys? But I feel like we've spent a bulk of today talking about and learning about that. So I want to twist it a little bit and maybe make it a little more nuanced and say, what advice would you give new attorneys or younger attorneys about keeping the right kind of balance and emotional health relative to their practice?
So you are asking absolutely the right question to the wrong lawyer. So the people who know me, I don't know, they would say that I've kept much balance. Here's what I would say. Find what you love. If you don't love what you're doing, look for something else. Because at the very beginning, of course, it will be hard. But if you don't feel some sense of fit, some sense of enjoyment, some sense of satisfaction, find something that you do. My father was right. If you really love what you're doing, you're on vacation 365 days a year. I have learned that it's pretty important to take some of those real vacations too. And it's only taken me, I don't know, maybe 40 years to learn that lesson, that some time away, some time off to recharge, it really is a good thing. But you know, people are different. And so my life went the way that it went. And what turned out to be what on the outside would appear to be the worst of times turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me. It led to where I am today. So I don't really rue the past at all. They were all steps along the way, and I think people need to find their way. I think being mindful that there is something to do other than work is important. I think our younger lawyers have that. I think that's a good thing, not a bad thing. I think today people recognize they have more choices to make than my generation did. I think that's all good. I have no worries about our new generation of lawyers. They will be our leaders. They'll be just fine. They'll probably have more, what was that word, Dan, balance? They probably will have more balance. Not a bad thing, just different.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Ron. We've run out of time, but we'll just have to have you back on again to talk more. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Before you all log off, please mark your calendars for our next episodes, which will be at 12:30. Dan Jaffe is on May 4th, Alexandra Leichter on June 1st, and our section leaders, Kendra Thomas and Gina Kang, on July 6th. Thank you to Genna, Jose, and Belinda at the bar, the Family Law Executive Committee, and of course, all of our section sponsors. Most importantly, thank you again, Ron, for being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
Bye, everyone.